When Evan Langston abandoned me to run after his younger sister, I thought I would collapse, crying and begging. But no, I simply smiled, accepted the large breakup payment he gave me, and walked away. From the very beginning, I already understood clearly that I was nothing more than a perfect copy, a stand-in for Summer Langston. I didn't resent anything, nor did I feel pain. I fulfilled my role as the alluring substitute, earned money, and kept what belonged to me. Money can be counted, but the heart is not something anyone gets to steal. When Evan came back looking for me, I only smiled and said evenly, "Sorry, my schedule is fully booked. I can't take on any more orders." Summer called me an arrogant mistress. She stood opposite me now, her face flushed red with anger. Her long hair fell over her shoulders exactly like mine, and she wore a simple long dress. The only difference was that she looked fragile and pitiful, while I held my head high with pride. Summer pointed at my face and snapped, "I was only abroad for 1 year, and you already seduced Evan away. Do you have no shame? Do you even know what decency is?" I crossed my arms over my chest, raised a brow, and replied, "Shame? What is that? Can you eat it?" Her whole body trembled with rage, her eyes filling with tears. "Do you really think you've won? Do you honestly believe Evan doesn't still love me? You're just a substitute, and you don't even know your place." I tightened my arms and gave her a mocking smile. "Whether he loves you or not, I don't know. But I do know that every night, Evan is with me." Summer's tears finally fell. She shook as she pointed at me. "A shameless woman like you. How could you possibly be my father's daughter too?" I lowered my head and laughed coldly without answering. Even I didn't understand why we shared the same father. But I still responded politely. "Maybe because your mother was just like me, she didn't know shame either. She was the one who stepped into someone else's marriage, stole another woman's husband, and then secretly had you. An illegitimate child. You." Summer's face turned bright red like a cat thrown into a corner. She lifted her hand, ready to slap me. I brushed my cheek lightly and raised my brow at her, then made a move that stunned her. Summer had grown up wrapped in luxury, while I'd suffered every hardship trying to survive. Our physical strength simply wasn't comparable. Her cheek reddened instantly, and tears streamed down like broken pearls as she stumbled back 2 steps in shock. I took out my phone, intending to call security to throw her out. Unexpectedly, her eyes lit up. She covered her face and ran toward the door, shouting, "Evan, I'm so scared." My heart sank. I turned and saw a tall figure standing at the doorway. I had no idea when he arrived. His whole presence was cold, his face heavy and unreadable. Evan Langston had come back. He pulled Summer into his arms and gently patted her back to comfort her, his movements incredibly tender. In his arms, Summer shot me a triumphant smile. I felt a wave of coldness sweep through my chest. Watching Evan's actions, I knew I had already lost this battle before even fighting it. Of course I had. I was only the substitute for when Summer and Evan fought, and then she went abroad. Because my face resembled hers, I was chosen, and I even took advantage of the chance to offer myself willingly. As a stand-in, how could I ever dare to dream of replacing the real one? Yet a small trace of unwillingness still lingered inside me. I smiled, stepped forward, and reached for his briefcase. "Evan, you're back?" Evan looked at me silently, his face filled with cold unfamiliarity and clear displeasure, despite the fact that just last night, he and I had been wrapped in each other's arms until late. This morning, I even helped him straighten his tie before sending him out the door. Yet now he was holding Summer as if I were some intruder disrupting their sacred love. The last bit of hope I had slowly sank. Summer sobbed in his arms. "Evan, I really regret going abroad. If I hadn't left, I wouldn't have lost you." Evan lowered his head to look at her, his eyes full of tenderness as he stroked her hair. With every gentle touch he gave her, another piece of my hope faded away. It wasn't until Summer stopped hiccuping from crying that Evan finally raised his head. His gaze, steady and unaffected, landed on me, but his question was directed at her. "Emily bullied you?" I clenched my teeth and said nothing. Summer choked out, "Emily just has a temper. I know she didn't mean anything else. I came to see you today without notice, so it's understandable she got upset." Her voice trembled pathetically. Full of fragile innocence, I lowered my gaze, staying silent. Evan's expression said everything. No matter what I said, it wouldn't matter. A substitute didn't get to speak. I knew I had lost, just like my mother once lost to hers, lost completely. Evan narrowed his eyes at me, his brows tightening. Emily, the day you first came here, I told you to understand who you are. A person should know their place. I bit my lip, letting out a self-mocking smile as I reached my hand toward him. Mr. Langston, I know my place very well. I'll leave this show for the two of you. I'm stepping out. Evan hesitated for a moment but didn't say anything. I dipped my head slightly, adjusted my expression, and said with a smile, Mr. Langston, call me tonight. We'll talk about the breakup. Without waiting for his response, I walked out of the mansion. No matter how chaotic my heart felt, my mind stayed clear. I knew this was the time to appear considerate, to let go decisively. With Evan's personality, the breakup compensation would definitely be generous. I really was that practical. Losing the man didn't mean I should lose the money too. As I stepped out the door, I heard Evan calling after me. Emily. My heart skipped a beat as I turned around, though I didn't even know what I was hoping for anymore. Summer also looked up at him, clinging to him like a fragile kitten. Crying softly. Evan looked at me, then at Summer, then finally lowered his head to wipe her tears and spoke to me in a low voice. I'll talk to you tonight. I turned and walked out, accepting defeat in every sense. That evening, Evan brought me the deed to a house, a gold card, and the documents for some shares. He said he was going to get engaged to Summer and hoped we would have nothing to do with each other from now on. I lowered my eyes and glanced at the papers, wealth that could let me live comfortably for the rest of my life. I nodded with a smile, trying to make the smile look exactly like Summer's. All right, Mr. Langston. Thank you for taking care of me these past years. Evan raised a brow at me, surprise flickering in his eyes, as if he hadn't expected me to be this calm. I wasn't crying, yelling, or clinging, just accepting everything so easily. I gathered the gifts he'd given me and smiled even more sincerely. Thank you for the gifts, Mr. Langston. Don't worry, I'll disappear completely from your sight. I won't bother you at all. Evan slowly frowned. Emily, are you happy about breaking up with me? I lowered my head slightly and corrected him with a smile. Not that, Mr. Langston. I'm happy because of the gifts. Dark anger clouded his eyes. After a few seconds, he stood up and left. I had no idea what he was angry about. The woman he loved had finally returned to the country, and I, the stand-in, was stepping aside. Wasn't this exactly what he wanted? And besides, every hour and every minute I spent with him, I had to constantly adjust my expressions and my voice. I had changed the way I dressed so I could look 90% like Summer Langston. You could say I was the perfect substitute, fully deserving of the money he gave me. Hard work deserves compensation, and responsibility always comes first. Where else could he find someone as dedicated as me? Yet the moment Summer returned, everything I had done suddenly became wrong. I held the breakup money in my hands and glanced out the window at the sports car he had just driven away. Slowly, I pulled back all the thoughts I'd had before and gave a bland smile. Men. Yes, that's how men are. The moment Evan left, I went from being a substitute to a wealthy woman. I took off the plain dress, wiped off the soft makeup, and threw out all the sweet, innocent clothes in the closet. Clothes Evan had bought in Summer's style, not mine. I put on a bright red mini dress, dyed my hair brown, styled it into classic voluminous waves, and added a bold red lipstick. This was the real me, Emily Shen. I bought piles of clothes and shoes I liked, and with the joy of shopping, returned to the mansion Evan had given me. My life had been full of hardships. Fate had shaped me into someone without a heart, emotionless and cold. Maybe sometimes I would feel something, but I would never let myself fall into love. I didn't have the luxury to. Now all I wanted was to live a good life, one better than Summer's. I wanted my mother to live a better life than Summer's mother. When I approached Evan, I had thought everything through. I never wanted Evan himself. What I wanted was his generous breakup compensation. Any feelings that happened in between were nothing more than a passing cold. I got out of the car, about to head inside, when a figure suddenly appeared right in front of me. I looked up. It was Summer Langston. She asked coldly, "How much breakup money did you demand from Evan?" I raised a brow. "More than you can imagine." After all, I served him well, and he was very satisfied. Summer let out a contemptuous laugh. No matter how well you serve him, what's the point? You're nothing but a beggar girl groveling for scraps. When you see Evan caring for me, you'll crawl into some corner and cry. I burst out laughing. Summer, do you really think I can't let go of Evan the way you do? I stepped closer and spoke gently. From beginning to end, I never loved him. I only loved his money. You can have him, and I'll take the money. We both win. Doesn't that sound fair? I knew I was lying through my teeth, but how could I show weakness in front of her? For once, Summer didn't speak. Instead, she stared at something behind me. Suddenly, my instincts told me something was wrong. A cold chill crept up my back, raising goosebumps on my skin. When I turned around, Evan Langston was standing right behind me, his face dark and unreadable. How could I have forgotten? Summer always provoked me in front of him. Of course, she wanted Evan to witness everything. Being played once wasn't enough. Apparently, I had to be played again. Summer hurried toward Evan, her steps light and delicate, looking every bit the fragile little kitten. Evan, why did you follow me? I just wanted to talk things out with Emily. You didn't have to worry so much. Evan held her in his arms with gentle movements, but his gaze stayed glued to me. Emily Shen, you've got some nerve. I bit my lip and forced a smile. Thank you for the compliment, Mr. Langston. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea? He let out a cold scoff. No need, you disgust me. He held Summer tightly and walked away without looking back. I watched his retreating figure, stood there for a moment, then quietly turned and went inside the house. That night, I brought my mother from our old run-down apartment to live in the mansion. After settling her in, half of my long-held wish was finally fulfilled. I returned to my bedroom with peace of mind. The king-sized bed beside me felt painfully empty, with no arms to warm me. I had been afraid of the cold since I was a child. For many nights, I could only fall asleep curled up in Evan Langston's embrace. Now I felt freezing. I wasn't forgetting him as quickly as I thought I would. I had gone to bed very late the night before. The next morning when I woke up, I went into the study. My hand brushed across the desk as I sat down in silence. So many nights, Evan had worked here while I brewed tea for him and kept him company. I had been the perfect lover. Whatever Summer Langston could do, I could do. Whatever she couldn't do, I had already done for him. Whenever Evan made decisions, I asked curious questions. I memorized every investment choice he made, the names of the startups he was eyeing. I could recall them even in my dreams. Over the years, I had completely replicated his way of thinking, his investment instincts, and his business experience. You could say I was his best student. My hand slid across his teacup, and out of habit, I brewed myself a cup of tea, copying the exact posture he used when sitting behind the desk. Evan had been generous. The breakup money he gave me was enough to invest. He had taken me to numerous business parties and left me with plenty of connections. After finishing the tea, I stood up, washed my face, changed into a dress, put on high heels, made a few calls, and went out to meet people. I had pretended to be Summer's substitute in front of Evan for an entire year, just to wait for this moment. The moment I started climbing upward. Back when my mother and I were kicked out of the Langston family home, I had already understood that being the lady of the house was never as good as being the one in charge. At least the boss can't be fired, but the lady of the house can always be replaced. When I first approached Evan, I didn't just want to be his mistress. I wanted to become the second Evan Langston. The days that followed were packed. I was so busy I barely came home, sometimes even attending parties every night. In front of Evan, I had never touched alcohol, but now I wore the most seductive dresses, drank the strongest liquor, and networked with all kinds of businessmen. When they found out Evan had dumped me, they were briefly stunned, then looked at my pale skin and gave me sympathetic pats on the hand, on my back, and even my thigh. I didn't care. As long as I could get into this circle, I wasn't afraid to pay whatever price. That so-called dignity only exists when you're strong enough to afford it. Fortunately, most people maintained some sense of restraint. Aside from a few suggestive remarks and leaving their numbers, no one went too far, except this time. I ran into a filthy old man who forced drinks on me, dragged me into another room, and began assaulting me. My strength was completely gone, and I suspected the alcohol had been spiked. I bit my lower lip until it bled just to stay conscious, then managed to dial a number for help. A few minutes later, the bar owner and security guards rushed in. They pulled the old man away and helped me out of the room. Half an hour later, Evan Langston appeared in front of me, carrying an icy presence, staring at my exposed pale skin. But in that moment of danger, the only phone number my mind could remember was his. Seeing him standing there was when I finally exhaled in relief. I gave him a weak, awkward smile before letting myself fall into sleep. When I woke up, I was lying on a hotel bed. I heard Evan's voice coming from the bathroom. "Summer, go ahead and sleep first." He said he'd come back after handling something. It was a voice I had heard for more than a year, yet I had never heard it sound so gentle. A faint bitterness rose in my chest. In the beginning, when our passion was still burning, I had also dreamed that I was the only one in his eyes. I had once acted cute, asking him for a promise, but the moment he frowned, I smiled and wrapped my arms around his neck, never mentioning it again. I sighed and waited. After he finished his call, he walked toward me and tossed a long dress at me. The tags were still attached. I had no idea where he had found it so late at night. It was a pure white dress, covering me from head to toe. "Emily, look at yourself right now. What do you look like?" His eyes dropped to the tight red dress I was wearing, one that barely reached my thighs. "Debasing yourself." The smile that had just lifted on my lips slowly froze. He tilted his chin at me. "You like money that much? I didn't give you enough, is that it? Is that why you're out drinking and earning more?" I lowered my eyes, stepped off the bed, slipped on my shoes, and stood in front of him with a strained smile. "You're right, Mr. Langston. I am cheap. If not, why would I willingly be someone's replacement?" "What did you just say?" A sharp glint flashed through his eyes. I lifted my head, and for the first time I didn't greet him with a smile. "Mr. Langston, no matter how cheap I am, you still slept with me for an entire year. And no matter how cheap I am, I never cheated with an old flame. And no matter how cheap I am, at least I'm the legitimate daughter, not someone who stole another woman's husband." Evan's face grew even colder. I gritted my teeth and let out a cold laugh. "Mr. Langston, you never had to live in poverty like I did, so you probably don't know what it feels like to always fear not having enough. You really are the kind who's rich enough to never understand the suffering of the poor. If you actually cared about me even a little, why don't you go ask your precious lover why she was born? Why her mother turned me from a real young lady into someone dirt poor? Why she stole my father? Why she took my man? And why I ended up being the unwanted substitute?" His expression wavered slightly, perhaps because he had never seen me cry. Maybe that was why he froze for a moment. I wiped my tears away, just as surprised at myself. I had thought that all I wanted was to climb higher. I had thought that after all these years of hardship, I had abandoned all human emotions. I thought feelings like sadness, joy, love, jealousy, none of those could reach me anymore. But I hadn't expected that there was still so much resentment inside me, so much injustice I had swallowed down. I shoved him away and stumbled out of the room, rushing outside to call a cab home. Tears streamed nonstop along the way. Once, I had been a cherished little princess. Yet in the end, I became a replacement for an illegitimate child, a toy for others to use at their convenience. Why? I truly didn't understand, nor could I accept it. After that day, Evan no longer contacted me. But all my previous investment projects were progressing smoothly. Unexpectedly, several good companies even took the initiative to approach me. And when I went out to meet business partners, no one dared lay a hand on me anymore. Everyone was extremely respectful. Perhaps Evan had given instructions behind the scenes. I accepted all these good things without hesitation. I had been afraid of poverty for far too long, so I knew how to seize every opportunity. As long as it was a resource that could help me rise, even if it came from an ex-lover, I gladly accepted it. Everything suddenly became smooth. I even had time to enroll in an MBA program, studying while expanding my network. I filed paperwork to establish my own company and began gradually recruiting staff. I collected flowers from others to decorate. In the end, it was better to buy my own flowers to wear. I studied hard, thought quickly, had persistence, and was good at socializing. Little by little, I carved out a place for myself in the industry, and once I had gained some footing, I began receiving invitations to certain high-profile events. For example, this time a wealthy businessman was hosting a birthday party. His son, who happened to be my MBA classmate, and I both received invitations. When I arrived, I discovered that my father, Charles Thorne, was also on the guest list. It made sense. No matter what, my father was a successful businessman, a well-known figure in this city. To everyone else, he was the perfect combination of prestige and wealth. But no one knew he had once started from nothing, using my maternal grandfather's support. And no one knew he had taken every cent my grandfather left my mother, then brought his mistress and illegitimate child home while throwing us out. He didn't even acknowledge me anymore, simply because after the divorce, I took my mother's surname and was no longer a Thorne. He believed the fact that I agreed to switch my last name was some kind of unforgivable sin, a declaration that I had severed my connection with him. From then on, my mother and I endured every hardship possible. There were times we could only pay our electric bill in installments of $15 or $20. There were nights I had to walk home alone through chaotic, dangerous neighborhoods just to save a few dollars on taxi fare. Now I stood not far from him, watching him and Evan Langston stand beside each other, doting on Summer. Suddenly, I found it laughable. In this world, there are things that simply have no logic. The eternal love people worship is never about loyalty, it's about whoever has the power, nothing more. I withdrew my gaze and prepared to go greet other guests, but just as I lifted my foot, Summer spotted me and cheerfully called out, "Emily." I wanted to pretend I hadn't heard, but she had already run over and grabbed my arm. "Why don't you greet Dad? There's no grudge in this family that lasts overnight. Are you still mad?" Then, without giving me a chance to refuse, she pulled me toward my father. My father let out a harsh snort, his eyes full of contempt as he glared at me. "You came here dressed like that, trying to seduce Evan again?" I smiled sweetly and glanced at Evan. "Is that what you think too?" Evan looked at my fitted evening gown, his gaze deep and unreadable, but he didn't say a word. My father continued scolding. "Where did you learn these tricks, huh? Did your mother teach you to be a fox like this?" I raised a brow. "No, I learned it from your current wife. After all, she used those exact tricks to throw me out of the house. I had to study carefully." Summer's face flushed red. "Emily, how could you speak like that to your elders? Besides, my parents are together because of love." I couldn't help laughing as I lowered my head. "Together? You mean the affair. Use the right word." "Emily." A sharp crack echoed through the room as Evan barked out my name. At the same moment, a blow landed on my face, shocking me. My father had slapped me, so hard my cheek burned, my ears rang, and my whole body felt like it had been hit with a surge of electricity. Everyone nearby turned to look, surprise flashing across each face. Only one tall man across from me, holding a glass of wine, simply watched, his gaze stirring something inside me. I hated letting anyone see me humiliated. Everything I'd worked for was to climb high enough to erase the shame of being abandoned by my father and to reclaim my lost dignity. But despite everything I'd done, I was still hit, still treated like a joke. "Charles Thorne," I spat. "Who do you think you are? What gives you the right to hit me?" I rubbed my ear and shoved him back. He roared, "Because I'm your father," and raised his hand to strike me again, but before he could bring it down, Evan Langston had grabbed my father's wrist. His expression was blank as he stared at Charles Thorne, who slowly lowered his hand. Summer stood beside them, glancing at Evan and then at me, tugging lightly on his sleeve. "Evan, let my dad go. You're too strong, and he's old. He can't handle the pain." I held the ear that was still ringing and let out a short laugh. Evan immediately took my hand and pulled me away, heading quickly toward the restroom. I stumbled after him, confused by what he was doing. As we passed the tall man with the faint smile from earlier, I even heard him say, "Hey there." I didn't have the energy to respond. My steps were unsteady from being dragged along. When we reached the restroom entrance, Evan finally let go. He gently touched my cheek. It hurt, so much that the feeling lodged deep in my chest. I closed my eyes, trying hard to hold back tears. His gaze lingered on my sharp winged eyeliner and something complicated flickered in his eyes. He said softly, "You insulted Summer's mom first. You were wrong. In a bit, go apologize to her. I'll drive you home." I opened my eyes wide. For a second, I thought I'd heard wrong. "Evan Langston, are you insane?" I was furious. I yanked my arm out of his grip. "What gives you the right to make me apologize? Who are you to me? You're just an ex-lover. Do you really think you're that important?" Evan narrowed his eyes. "Emily, what did you say?" "I said you're just my ex. We traded what we needed to trade. That's done. You have no right to order me around. What do you know about playing mediator anyway?" I was already in a terrible mood, and he still expected me to apologize to Summer. It was absurd. Once upon a time, I had even imagined that maybe, just maybe, he still had the tiniest bit of feeling for me. Now I realized how stupid I had been. Anyone who clings to illusions and doesn't understand their own worth is just begging to be humiliated. Evan squeezed my wrists so tightly that cold sweat ran down my back. His eyes were dangerous. I knew he was genuinely angry, even though his face remained calm. His deep gaze bore into me as he asked, "Emily, is it only lovers who can make you listen?" I refused to answer. He leaned closer, lowering his head until our noses nearly touched. "Name your price." I blinked, thinking I misheard. "What did you just say?" He repeated slowly. "Name your price. I'll keep you." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It was too ridiculous. "You want to cheat? And I get to help you cheat on Summer?" Part of me wanted him to say yes, and part of me desperately wanted him to say no. His eyes darkened as he stared at my exposed collarbone. "Emily, I don't like the way you're dressed or the way you're acting right now," he said in a low, rough voice. "I won't touch you in any way that betrays Summer, but I want you within my protection. Stay close. Stop doing things that will hurt you." My tears fell, but only because I was laughing so hard. "Mr. Langston wants a mistress, huh? Too bad I hate trouble. No patience for that. I only offer my body, not conversation." His gaze grew even darker as he grabbed my shoulders, about to say something, when a mocking voice sounded behind us. "Evan, your little girlfriend is looking for you." His tone was cold, laced with ridicule. Evan and I both turned. It was the tall man from earlier, the one who had smiled at me. Up close, I realized he and Evan looked quite alike. Sharp features, striking bone structure. He extended a hand toward me. "Hey, I'm Mason Langston." I knew who Mason Langston was. He was Evan's cousin. Mason Langston was the youngest of the Langston family, born years later than the rest, with outstanding ability. Rumor had it that Evan's parents were wary of him. The fight for the family inheritance in the future was bound to be bloody. Evan was often compared to him. After all, they were only 5 years apart and both exceptionally accomplished. Evan looked at Mason with caution and quietly positioned himself between us. Mason, however, just smiled. "You're going to let her stand there and get slapped by her father again?" Evan paused, then leaned close and whispered to me, "Go home and wait for my call." After a slight hesitation, he raised his voice, "And stay away from strangers." With that, he hurried toward the main hall. I vaguely saw Summer tearfully fling herself into his arms, sobbing against his chest. My heart felt like someone had tied a weight to it, dragging it down. Mason leaned against the wall, smiling faintly as he watched me. I forced myself to suppress my anger and glared at him. "What are you looking at?" "Just waiting to see when you start crying." He checked the watch on his wrist. "How much longer can you hold it in?" I swallowed my tears immediately. "If you have that much free time, go get your brain checked. See how long until you have a stroke." Mason chuckled softly and extended a hand toward me. "Be my friend." I knew I should be tactful. After all, Mason Langston was someone worth forming connections with. But right now, I wasn't in the mood at all. I shook my head and turned away. As I reached the corner, I accidentally glanced back and saw him still standing in the same spot, his sharp gaze fixed on me with a hint of intrigue. After that party, everything in my life began falling apart. Contracts that were already agreed upon were suddenly canceled. My company's operations hit one obstacle after another. I knew something wasn't right. When I secretly investigated, I discovered it was all my father's doing. Anyone who had shown me respect because of Evan, when forced to choose between me, a former lover, and my father, the future father-in-law of the Langston family, naturally chose my father. I clenched my teeth, scrambling desperately to salvage what I could. but my network was nowhere near as extensive as Charles Thorne's. I had no chance of building enough strength to fight back. I was exhausted, running everywhere, becoming a joke to many people. Some, pretending to be kind, or maybe genuinely so, advised me to find another lover. They said with my looks and social skills, I could easily find a new man to back me. I didn't want that. I stubbornly continued searching for my own solutions. Until one day, I received a call inviting me to a private party. They said a benefactor wanted to introduce me to someone. At that point, I had no other options, so I agreed. The moment I walked into the room, I saw a man seated at the head of the table. His sharp features resembled Evan's, except he smiled more, his fox-shaped eyes narrowing with a playful glint as he stared straight at me. He nodded. "We meet again." I bit my lip hard and forced myself to smile as I sat down across from him. "Hello, Mr. Langston. Call me Mason." He raised his glass toward me. "Be my friend." I took a deep breath and nodded. "All right, Mason." After the party ended, Mason had clearly drunk too much. As we prepared to leave, he told me to help him walk. Behind us, I heard people murmuring and laughing. "Emily's found another backer already. She'll bounce back for sure." And this time, she found Evan's older cousin. The Langston family is going to be interesting. Those two have never gotten along. Isn't there a saying? Beautiful women bring disaster. I pretended not to hear any of it, reminding myself that only those standing at the top never have to listen to whispers. Mason chuckled softly above me as I supported him. "Let's see how long you can hold it in this time." I took a deep breath. "As long as you want me to hold it in, I'll hold it in." Mason Langston checked his watch. "Half an hour. Go." He opened the car door. I got in and sat quietly. At that moment, it almost felt like I had given up on myself entirely. After all, I used to be someone's mistress. My fate was never as favorable as Summer Langston's, yet I still wanted to live better than she did. But greedy people are always punished eventually. Mason sat beside me in the back seat, resting his head on his hand, squinting at me with a faint smile curling at his lips. I didn't look at him. I didn't care where he planned to take me. After about 10 minutes, he suddenly said, "Hold it in for 20 more minutes." I shot him a look. He was staring out the window. 10 minutes later, he said again, "Hold on for 10 more minutes." Outside, the sky was pitch black. Street lights cast dim reflections on a dense forest passing by. Only then did I realize we were on the highway, already in the outskirts of the city. A chill crawled up my spine. Scenes from horror movies flashed through my mind. The man next to me, smiling faintly the whole way, only intensified my fear. "Where are you taking me?" I backed away slightly. He checked his watch. "Just a few more minutes." Terror prickled across my skin. I quietly grabbed my phone, ready to call the police. Mason chuckled and reached behind me to take the phone from my hand. "Hang on a few more minutes, okay? A false police report will get you in trouble." My face went numb with fear. I didn't want to die. And I still hadn't lifted my head proudly in front of all those awful people out there. I still hadn't gotten my revenge. Time began to slow. Every second tortured both body and mind. I almost begged, "Please, don't hurt me. I still have things I need to do." Mason burst into loud laughter and signaled the driver to stop the car. He got out first and waved at me to follow. I didn't want to, but the driver urged, "He's not going to hurt you. If he did, the Langston family would owe you too much. That's impossible." Doubt lingered, but I had no other choice. I stepped out. Mason beckoned me over and pointed at a dark lake in front of us. No need to hold it anymore. I looked around and finally realized we were near the Langston family's old estate, a wealthy residential district in the suburbs, guarded around the clock. Relief washed over me. But immediately afterward, everything I'd been suppressing, fear, humiliation, shock, rushed up all at once. I couldn't hold back anymore. I broke down, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe, tears and snot streaming uncontrollably. Tears are strange. They either stop at the first drop or, once unleashed, they flood everything, multiplying all the pain you've ever endured. I sank to the ground, crying in a pathetic heap, muttering between sobs. Why? Why is it always like this? What did I do wrong? Why doesn't my dad want me? Why did Evan leave me? Why can't I keep anything? I cried for a long, long time until I had no strength left to cry. Mason stood beside me silently, waiting. Only after my sobs subsided did he help me to my feet and hand me tissues to wipe my face. I hiccuped repeatedly, but the heaviness in my chest had lifted. For the first time in my life, I felt lighter. I looked at him in confusion. "Why?" Mason smirked. "I wanted to see how long you'd hold out." I thought he had something seriously wrong with him, but I didn't dare say it. I could only change the subject. "It's really quiet here." Mason looked out at the lake for a moment before nodding. Perfect place to cry. And somehow, in that strange way, I ended up forming a connection with Mason Langston. Even stranger, people began spreading rumors that he was my sponsor. The rumors were vivid and detailed, almost believable. But the good thing about rumors was that my work started going smoothly again. I used this rare period of stability to push my career forward. I told myself that one day, I would be strong enough that no one could choke me into silence again, and I wouldn't need to rely on the reputation of any man. I would stand at the top on my own and smile down at everyone. But rumors also had a dark side. The dark side was that Evan Langston believed them. He showed up at my place in the middle of the night, drunk out of his mind, pounding on my door and demanding, "Are you seeing Mason Langston?" I frowned, but still let him inside. I went to the kitchen to make hangover soup, covered him with a blanket, and let him rest. I had taken care of him like this so many times before, but now, doing the same things felt like something from a past life. He stared at me without blinking, gesturing for me to come closer. I picked up the soup and approached him. He told me to lean down. I bent closer, and Evan leaned forward, whispering, "What did you give me? Why can't I forget you?" A faint ache flared in my chest, but I reminded him softly, "You have summer now." It was like someone splashed cold water on him. He instantly pulled his hand back, closed his eyes, and didn't say another word until morning. When daylight came, I found myself staring at him, confused. I didn't understand why he stayed the whole night. But since this was the house he'd given me, I didn't stop him from staying. Around 7, Evan finally got up and prepared to leave. While washing his face, he asked, "Are you and Mason really a thing?" Leaning against the bathroom doorframe, I laughed, my gaze sweeping over him with a hint of greed. But I didn't answer. Why should I? Why did he dote on Summer, yet I, his disposable substitute, had to report my private life after we'd broken up? With no answer, Evan left with a cold expression. But before stepping out, he glanced at me. "Mason's a fox. You're no match for him. And my offer from the other night? You can consider it any time." I smiled politely. "Take care, Mr. Langston." The door slammed loudly behind him. I stood quietly for a long moment, then lifted my chin and stepped out to continue the fight. Recently, Mason Langston had been meeting me frequently. Even during his work appointments or when entertaining clients, he wanted me by his side. Rumors said I was his favored woman, maybe even the future mistress of the Langston estate if Mason won the inheritance war. Even my father, Charles Thorne, called me. I didn't answer. His shamelessness even extended to calling my mother afterward. He hadn't reached out to us in over 15 years. I blocked his number, feeling a kind of satisfaction I'd never felt before. Still, I didn't dare believe the rumors. Mason had never even touched me once. Sometimes I genuinely suspected something was wrong with him. At times it even felt like he was training me, grooming me to become an heir. At his office, I simply sat beside him working, like a student learning business from her teacher. Occasionally, he even quizzed me. When I accompanied him to parties, he introduced me as his little apprentice. Over drinks, he taught me negotiation tactics, how to read a room, how to strategize. Evan once said Mason was a fox, and he wasn't wrong. But what exactly was this fox planning inside his head? I truly didn't understand. All I knew was that I was improving quickly, far faster than time itself should allow. I had secretly learned from Evan Langston, but with Mason's guidance and protection, I was advancing at an astonishing pace. My relationship with him had even shocked the Langston family's patriarch. The old man wanted to meet the fox, who first seduced his grandson and then seduced his nephew. He hadn't even agreed to meet Summer yet, and things had already escalated this far. For a moment, I thought maybe Mason really did have feelings for me, enough to let the old man know. But the very next second, with one sentence, he shattered every assumption I had. While reviewing documents, without even lifting his head, he said to the Langston family assistant, no need for a meeting. I sat beside him, feeling awkward and embarrassed, but I kept a polite smile on my face. The assistant shot me a disdainful look before leaving. I pretended not to see it. After he left, Mason continued signing papers, but inside me, a fire was burning. I didn't even know why I was angry. Not even when Evan and Summer reconciled had I felt this upset. I knew I was being unreasonable, but Mason was the first man in years who never had any ulterior motive toward me, never looked down on me, and had given me respect. He had helped me gain confidence. And now, I couldn't help showing my dissatisfaction. When Mason finished reviewing the documents, he picked up his coffee. Seeing the look on my face, he paused in surprise. Then the corner of his mouth lifted into a beautifully curved smirk. "You're mad?" I forced a fake smile. "Of course not." "Then why are your lips twitching?" he asked, amused. I relaxed my jaw, letting go of my lower lip, and lowered my head without speaking. Then Mason stood up and walked toward me. For the first time, he did something physically close. He placed his hand on my head, his tone cool but tinged with subtle amusement. "What I meant was, you don't have to meet him. Not that he doesn't want to meet you." The distance in his voice made me fail to realize at first that him referred to my own biological father. Surprised, I looked up at him, and for the first time, I noticed how deep and unreadable his eyes were. After refusing the patriarch's assistant, the Langston matriarch also sent someone over to summon me. Mason simply let out a cold laugh and repeated, "No need." I found it strange but didn't dare ask. A few days later, Evan gave me the answer. He confronted me in front of my house, his face frozen cold. "Emily, why did you choose Mason Langston?" I shrugged. "Why did you choose Summer?" Evan grabbed my arm, stiffening a little before letting out a cold laugh. "You always look down on Summer because she's an illegitimate child, yet you chose another illegitimate child?" He went on, "Because of you, Mason has angered both the patriarch and matriarch. The old man has declared that illegitimate children have no inheritance rights in the Langston family." I froze. Evan tightened his grip on my shoulders. "Emily, he's lost his inheritance. He has nothing left to give you." A surge of anger exploded in my chest. I struggled, but his grip was too strong. I glared up at him. "And what can you give me? A mistress title? So I can give birth to another one of your precious family's illegitimate children? That's what all of you Langstons like, isn't it?" Evan stiffened. He looked confused, almost regretful. "You think that's what I wanted? You stayed by my side for a year. Why did you hide who you really were? Why did you wait until after we broke up to show me you were capable of making me lose control?" He scoffed softly. "An innocent girl with a red lipstick stain on her chest. That's the kind of thing men never forget." I didn't know where the strength came from, but I shoved him hard and stepped away. I didn't have time to argue. I just wanted to find Mason. Evan stood there stunned for a long moment before saying quietly, "I regret it. Isn't that enough?" I didn't care about anything he was saying. I pulled out my phone and searched for Mason Langston's number. Evan continued, "If you want to come back, I can change my decision." But I still didn't pay attention, waving him off. "Mr. Langston, you should go handle your own business. The Langston family is big enough to keep you busy for a long time." Evan's voice turned cold, trembling ever so slightly. "Emily, this is your last chance. I can let Summer go." I lifted my head and cut him off. When we first broke up, I used to dream of him saying that to me every night. So why hadn't he said it earlier? Why did he wait until Mason appeared? I used to think I'd never be able to forget Evan, but then Mason showed up. And only when I was beside him did I realize how addictive it felt to be respected and valued. Turns out, real safety comes more from growing stronger than from a beautiful face. And now, all I wanted was to go to Mason and tell him that if he wanted me, I'd stay with him, rich or poor. Good seeds bring good fruit. My eyes stung as I looked at Evan. I had to take a deep breath before forcing the words out. "I'm going to find Mason. You should go." Something like pain flickered in Evan's eyes. "I'm about to get engaged. If you come back, I can change fiancés." He reached forward as if to pull me back, but I stepped away. "The Langston patriarch doesn't like women who bounce between uncle and nephew like me," I said flatly. "If you're planning to get engaged to me, aren't you afraid he'll cut your inheritance too?" Evan's hand froze midair. I gave him a small smile. Let it go. A fortune that big would be a shame to lose. I think you and Summer suit each other. Evan, usually decisive, hesitated for the first time. He even told me to wait, as if I should wait until he secured absolute power in the Langston family. I laughed bitterly, watching his figure fade away in disappointment. You reap what you sow. Evan got into his car, and with a burst of exhaust, he disappeared from my sight. A momentary emptiness washed over me, but only for a moment. I quickly called Mason. His phone rang for a long time. Anxiety crawled through me. He finally picked up, but said nothing. My heart tightened. Where are you? I'm coming to find you. There was silence on the other end, until he finally said quietly, Look west. Startled, I turned my head, and there he was. A tall figure leaning against an elm tree by the sidewalk, eyes narrowed in a soft smile. I rushed toward him, looking him over carefully. When did you get here? Why didn't you say anything? I didn't know how much he had seen of my argument with Evan, and nervousness crept in. Mason smiled wider. Just got here. I suddenly felt like drinking tonight, so I came to find you. I let out a breath of relief, but then worry surfaced again. Are you okay? I heard someone say that. You're an illegitimate child. Is that true? Mason casually wrapped an arm around my shoulders, guiding me toward his car. His nonchalance left me speechless. All I could do was fiddle with my fingers. He told me to get in, then drove straight toward the outskirts. I recognized the road. It looked like the one leading to the Langston family estate. Anxiety tightened my chest. Are you taking me to confront them? Mason froze for a second, then burst into loud laughter. He pulled over abruptly, grabbed me without warning, and planted a loud kiss on my forehead. Are you out of your mind? He said. He clearly wasn't in the most stable state of mind, so I didn't argue about the fact that he had kissed me while scolding me. He waved for me to get out of the car. When I stepped out and looked around, I realized this was the exact spot where he had forced me to cry my heart out a few days ago. I flustered. I don't want to cry today. Mason didn't look at me. He stared quietly at the lake. When I was little, whenever things felt unbearable, I'd come here and cry. Here, no one laughs, no one looks down on you, and no one tattles. It was the first time I'd ever seen his eyes without a smile in them, only a sadness far too heavy for someone his age. He kept staring at the water. My mom and the Langston matriarch fought for years, but she still couldn't take the position of the rightful wife. In the end, she lost her mind. They put her in a psychiatric hospital. Since I was 8, I've had to survive on my own in the Langston household. My heart tightened painfully, but I didn't know how to comfort him. I could only quietly take his cold hand and give him whatever warmth I had. He held my hand tightly. Everyone in the Langston family has lovers and illegitimate kids. Evan has 2 half-sisters outside the family too. This was news to me. Hearing the hurt in his voice, I moved closer, trying to comfort him. That isn't fair. Mason pulled me into his arms. When I was young, I didn't understand anything. I thought the matriarch ruined my mom, so I hated her. But when I grew up, I realized it wasn't her. He turned toward the Langston estate in the distance. The person I should hate is someone else. I nodded slowly, feeling the truth of his words. That was also why I had never tried to pick a fight with Summer, because I knew exactly who I should hate. Mason pulled me down to sit on the grass. So I've always had one dream, he said. I want to make sure the Langston family never again has the power to create insane and cruel women. Something in his tone felt off. He smiled, but the smile was cold. I grew uneasy. What are you planning to do? For a second, I even thought about buying him a book on criminal law. He leaned down, meeting my eyes. But the road is lonely. I've been walking it alone for so long, until the day I saw you at that party, still holding yourself together, still pretending to be strong. I remembered the child I used to be, and I realized I'd finally found someone who could walk with me. I stared into his eyes. Those fox-shaped eyes weren't smiling anymore. They were slightly red, fragile but impossibly captivating. Evan once told me I had a talent for enchanting people. But right now, the one who truly had an irresistible pull was Mason Langston. Faced with those eyes, anything he said sounded right. He leaned down and kissed me. It was soft but unyielding, stealing my breath. After a moment, he whispered against my ear, Emily, I've walked alone for too long. And just like that, Mason and I officially got together. People said I was crazy for choosing the Langston family's abandoned son. Maybe I was, but I was genuinely happy. Turns out, loving someone who shares your soul heals wounds you didn't even know were still bleeding. Turns out, being held by someone you trust melts away pain you thought you'd buried forever. A few months later, Evan held his engagement party and became the official heir of the Langston family. Mason and I attended together. The Langston elders looked at me with obvious disgust. They didn't even bother speaking to me. My father, Charles Thorne, also paid attention to the situation and stopped cursing at me. It was as if my father didn't even know me. Mason and I stood isolated in a corner like two sources of infection. Anyone walking past sped up as if afraid of having to greet us. Such warmth and coldness, how quickly people switched sides. Worried Mason might feel hurt, I tugged on him, intending to leave early, but he smiled and gently patted the back of my hand. I need to see you give up completely. I laughed, exasperated by how he always managed to tease me. My heart belonged only to him now. How could I still cling to old dreams that no longer belonged to me? All I remembered was him. On the stage, Evan Langston carried himself with confidence, raising his glass as he toasted the crowd. Summer, petite and sweet-looking, leaned against him with a radiant, blissful smile. When the two of them turned around to offer toasts, they unexpectedly spotted Mason and me. I waved at them from afar and mouthed, "Congratulations." The glass slipped from Evan's hand and shattered loudly on the floor. I saw him attempt to walk toward me, but Summer subtly pulled him back. I smiled, shaking my head as if watching an old friend lose composure. An old friend with whom all debts had ended. No more love, no more hate. Just an old friend whose eyes turned red the moment he looked at me. I nudged Mason lightly. "Can we go now?" He grinned, leaned down, and kissed me deeply, a kiss full of dominance and possession. Then he slung an arm over my shoulder, waved casually at Evan, and led me away. I felt both amused and helpless. Mason was usually calculated in everything he did, yet tonight he behaved like a child. But then he looked at me seriously. "Before going into battle, you have to steady your troops. I don't want you to be hung up on anyone else." I rolled my eyes at him, but inside, my heart melted. It felt good to be cherished. After the engagement party, Evan officially gained full control over the Langston family's fortune and power. The inheritance war had ended, with Mason losing spectacularly. People said Mason had been bewitched by me, that otherwise he could have surpassed Evan. I only laughed when I heard such rumors. I didn't have the time to be offended. I worked day and night. I barely had time to breathe, let alone care about gossip. Mason was the same. After losing the Langston family's assets, he became even busier. It wasn't until he took me to the lake for the second time that I learned he had another company outside the family. It wasn't flashy, but it was incredibly powerful, a company he secretly built using the Langston family's own resources. And now, that company had the strength to swallow the Langston family whole. Mason had lived within the Langston estate for most of his life. He knew every weakness the family had. And his company was born to be the Langstons' natural predator. My own company, with Mason's guidance, was also growing rapidly. Mason once told me, "I can't give you the title of the Langston family's matriarch, nor can I give you bouquets of flowers or the admiration of crowds. But the one thing I can give you is the ability to earn all those things yourself." He said, "For a little wolf, feeding it meat is useless compared to teaching it how to hunt and helping it claim an entire prairie." I wholeheartedly agreed. When what you have is earned by your own abilities, you no longer fear losing anything. You no longer have to walk a path filled with anxiety. At the very least, I no longer have to stand in front of a mirror thousands of times, practicing how to look like another woman. And I am no longer afraid of being abandoned by anyone, whether it's my father or the man I love. Mason Langston had given me the best gift, the greatest promise I could imagine in this world. 2 years passed quickly. In those 2 years, we never saw the Langston family again, not until today, when the family matriarch passed away. She had carried too much bitterness in her heart for too many years. Her illness dragged on, and in the end, she couldn't endure any longer. Mason and I returned to pay our respects. Evan was there as well. He looked far more exhausted than before, his eyes dim as he stared at me. I knew he was worn down both physically and mentally. The illegitimate son, whom the old patriarch had raised overseas, had grown up and returned to the country. Rumor had it the patriarch adored him. The old man still wielded significant influence in both the family and the company, and he had handed a portion of the Langston fortune to this son. The matriarch, who had spent years guarding against Mason and had driven his mother into madness, never thought to guard against the fourth son returning from abroad. The shock and fury had taken her life, and Evan's illegitimate half-sister, seeing what happened, went straight to the press to expose her identity, determined to fight for her share of the inheritance. Evan was under tremendous pressure. I could tell that pressure had shifted onto Summer. For the first time, I saw Summer looking completely worn out, no longer sweet and lively. She walked toward me, staring at me with dark, hollow eyes. "What did you drug Evan with?" she demanded. I blinked, confused. "Are you insane?" She clenched her jaw, unable to hide the exhaustion on her face. "It's been 2 years. Evan keeps making me wear red dresses, high heels, curling my hair the way you used to. He forces me to copy everything you did. Even at night, when he sleeps next to me, he calls your name." I blinked again, once, twice, before finally registering that her makeup, hairstyle, and clothes were a perfect copy of mine. As if someone had photocopied me. It was ridiculous, but somehow I couldn't laugh. Times had changed. Now it was Summer who had become someone's replacement. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was a deep, soul-weary exhaustion. I lifted my head and turned to Mason. "Let's go. I'm tired." Mason gave the family matriarch's portrait one last look, then took my hand. "Come on." We walked away. Behind us, Summer shrieked insults at me, her voice sharp, hysterical. I paused for a moment but ultimately didn't look back. After the funeral, chaos continued within the Langston family. But it didn't last long. They soon had no energy left to keep fighting. One after another, the Langstons' major business sectors were attacked, their market share plummeted. The patriarch and his son were exposed for illegal business practices, tax evasion, monopoly abuse, unfair competition. All the skeletons in their closet were dragged into daylight, and investigations followed. The only one who escaped the fallout was Evan. The stock market plunged, shareholders dumped their shares, banks demanded immediate repayment. The Langston family's capital chain snapped overnight, and in just one night, the entire Langston empire collapsed, nothing left to hold on to. And with that collapse, there would no longer be mistresses, illegitimate children, or replacement daughters. In this world, noble and wealthy families. Those families no longer existed. Evan Langston lost everything in the blink of an eye. From a man surrounded by admiration, he became someone everyone avoided. I had someone deliver a card to him, returning all the breakup money he once gave me. He wasn't the same anymore, and I wasn't the girl from back then either. Now, I no longer needed anyone's hush money to survive. Evan sent the third card back, asking the messenger to thank me for him. I knew that even the thinnest camel was still bigger than a horse. His life wouldn't be too miserable. And I also knew he was capable. Sooner or later, he would rebuild himself. So I accepted the card and didn't bring it up again. Summer, on the other hand, the one who once swore up and down she would be with him forever, filed for divorce immediately after the Langston family collapsed. But her swift decision couldn't save the Thorne family either. My father's company had depended on the Langstons' rise to survive. Less than half a month after their downfall, the Thorne family's illegal activities were also exposed. The company couldn't hold on and announced bankruptcy. On the night my father's company collapsed, the sky was incredibly beautiful. Mason and I stood by the window together, looking at the moon and raising our glasses. He dramatically pointed out the window, his finger almost poking the sky. "The moon is so bright." Under the moonlight, the ring on his hand reflected a shimmering silver glow. I couldn't stop laughing at him and mimicked his theatrics, lifting my ring finger toward the window. "That's right," he said softly. "The moonlight makes your ring shine beautifully." He reached out and held my hand, our fingers interlacing tightly, 2 wedding rings quietly side by side. Neither of us said a word. A moment later he smiled gently. "Thank you, Mrs. Langston, for making sure I'm not lonely anymore." I nestled into his chest and whispered, "I should be the one thanking you. Thank you for giving me strength, so I'll never again fear being abandoned by anyone." not even by you. The moonlight was beautiful. His arms were warm, my heart was peaceful, and that was enough.